to the New Human series. We're here in Louisville, Colorado at the Crimson Circle Connection Center, our beautiful studio here. And we are here with Jim Self, Steve Rother, and Jeffrey Hoppe. And they have some very special information to share with all of us, I'm sure. I'm so sure I'm nervous. And I never get nervous, but I'm nervous. So, we have a full studio, absolutely full, completely full. We're glad that you could be here and hear for us, and we hope you enjoy it. And then we have a very large audience listening in or watching. And this could go on for quite a long time. And we have people from more than 53 countries already, and this is just launching. So apparently, there must be a lot of interest in this topic because there is certainly a lot of things we are hearing about this. And as a human, it can be exciting and scary as hell.
Yeah.
You agree?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we're really excited here because Jim and Steve and Jeffrey are world-renowned teachers. They're channelers. They connect with entities and ascended masters beyond. So they have some really inside information that they're actually daring to share with us. Is that true?
That's a little scary.
I know.
Only the scary stuff, yeah.
I know. But I am not a real positive person, but I am hopeful.
We'll see how you're doing at the end of the day.
I know, I watch too much sci-fi. Okay, so it's timely, it's an important topic, and they have a lot to share with us. So, I invite you, we're gonna have each of them present, and we're gonna invite you when we do this to consider that there will be similarities in the information and differences. And then it's up to you to discern what is right for you, what works for you, because that's always our choice as the human. So, let's welcome Jim Self. He is the founder of MasteringAlchemy.com. He has incredible work, and could you tell us just a little bit about yourself and Mastering Alchemy?
There's a lot of pressure.
You only have 2 minutes.
So a little bit of myself. In thinking about that, I've had a really interesting life, as all of you have had a really interesting life. But to a great extent, you never see that life until you pass through it and you get to look back at it. And so in numbers of ways in my reality growing up as a kid, and I watch this with everybody, when you come into this body, you have all of these abilities on. That soft spot on top of the head, that connection to home, still all there. But you have all of these spiritual abilities, your clairvoyance, your clairsentience, your awareness in that context. And then you begin to play with mom, dad, teacher, minister, who say no and don't, and this is right, and that's good, and do this, and don't hang out with them, eat these foods. And you say, okay. And you start to shut all that down. In my reality, I didn't shut it down. And so then continuing to play it out with it on when everybody else is saying no, don't, and stop, et cetera, created a lot of challenges in my upbringing, as well as probably challenges in many of your upbringings. One of the things I've watched a lot of people do, and I think myself, is when 100 people in a room and you're the only one saying yes and they're all saying no, you begin to shut down somewhat. You begin to be an avoider, a hider. Anybody know that space? And because you're so sensitive in your perception. And somewhere I learned to be able to use that perception, but not necessarily talk about what I see, and then learn how to navigate with it. And that skill became really very interesting in my upbringing. And then when I started to play in school, in my reality, I was definitely not a smart kid, or at least in their reality, I was definitely not a smart kid, because I would do things backwards. I would just put the answer of the math problem on the paper. I didn't do the long division in the process. And inevitably, I would get in trouble, and it always surprised me because they would always say, you're cheating. And I'd say, well, put me in a room by myself and give me the test. But then that never happened. How sad. so, but in the process of growing up, paying attention to how to learn to navigate this system. And then at 24, I did something kind of crazy. I was elected to the San Jose, California City Council.
You were just a baby.
Baby, absolutely. And it was an interesting process because I was all about making something happen for people, and the system is not about making something happen for people, but it was a foundational piece. And leaving that place, I guess 8 years later, as vice mayor of San Jose, I went to the government as a presidential appointee under Jimmy Carter and was responsible for the Department of Energy's governmental operations. All of that was really fascinating, but what it really said was, this is how it works, but don't tell anybody, and it's different than the democracy you live in. And it became really clear that something was broken. And out of that, then leaving the government and going into business and growing businesses, those skill sets, clairvoyance, et cetera, began to be very, very valuable. But all along the process, there was always this internal guidance system, this voice. And that voice was always able to say, this is appropriate, this isn't appropriate. And when I went over here, it didn't work, and when I went over here, anybody know that place? So that became something that drove my sense of perception. And out of that, that voice turned out to be many of these archangelics that I get to play with. And it wasn't one voice, it was many voices. And then in about 2003, it was Metatron, one of the archangelics, Lords of Light, who said, there's a path that's never ever been walked before in humanity. And if you'd like to play in this path, it will expand your own evolution. It will allow the earth to become, once again, that 12th dimensional, fully Christed consciousness that it once was. And you'll be able to hold the door open in that 5th dimensional space for all humanity to evolve. Would you like to play? And you don't go, well, let me think about it. And so from there, Mastering Alchemy kind of unfolded.
Wow, what a wonderful beginning.
Yeah, but the key is you get to look back at the journey and then begin to understand the value of it.
Well, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
So next, let's welcome Steve Rother. Steve, could you tell us a little bit about your path to creating Espavo.com and your work?
Thank you, Linda.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Espavo.org.
Espavo.org, thank you.
Espavo.org.
We're fascinating, as you look back, like you're talking about, is really interesting. I grew up in a very supportive family. We communicated incredibly well. We would have family meetings every week where you could say anything. You could tell your parents anything at all, not get in trouble.
Are you an alien?
Yeah, exactly. I think my parents were aliens. So they really set the bar for me to be empowered, to do the things, and to trust myself. And growing up, going through things, I was very slow in school, did not fit in the school system. Had my IQ tested and actually found out I was the other side of it. I was bored. I was waiting for something to happen, waiting to get into things. So anyway, it was an interesting process for me to learn to really trust myself and to be able to do that. But once I got involved in this, I started a family. My wife and I are going to celebrate our 46th wedding anniversary in about 2 weeks. So we started a family, started raising things, normal type of thing. I was a general contractor in San Diego. I enjoyed my work. I enjoyed the creativity of it. Love to empower people. We'd always have our employees love to come to work for us. They love to stay with us, even if we didn't have any work or whatever the situation was. So it was really fascinating for us to do that, and I always felt like there was more. There was something to it. And then I'll never forget, I picked up a book that just completely knocked me out. The first book I picked up was from Ruth Montgomery, who was a channel way back in the 70s. And I picked it up, and it just started ringing true, and I read everything I could get my hands on. And looking back now, I never thought about this until probably about a year ago, but looking back now, she would always start her channels with, hello, this is Arthur, Lily, and the group, which I channel. I channel the group. Now, I don't know if it's the same group that she channels or what, but interestingly enough, after that, I picked up another book that just completely knocked my socks off, and it was a Cryon book. And it just resonated with that. Found a group of people online that actually Jeff Hoppe started. He started a whole connection with that. We started that first chat room, and I was probably one of the first 12 people, I think, that were involved in the whole thing. And we all started trying, thinking, oh, I channel this entity or I channel this entity. And I wanted to know who I channeled because I could feel it coming. And I even said to Jeff one time, I said, why don't we do a meditation online? We'll do a global meditation online and see what happens. And Jeff came back and he says, good idea, Steve. Let me know when you have it ready. So I started saying, okay, I'm going to sit down and write a meditation. And that's when I started channeling. And literally, if you've ever gotten an idea on a keyboard and tried to write and have it come through so fast that you can't type fast enough, and sometimes you end up typing through the tears because it strikes your heart so deep, that's what I was experiencing. And it was very magical and very empowering to be able to share it with this group and so forth. And I think we had 3 or 4 professional channels that, besides you and I, that evolved from that group. So obviously there was a contract there to work with. Started working with other things. We started moving in the spiritual arena when I wrote my first book, some 21 years ago. And now I stopped writing books a little while ago, but I do have another one in the works now. But I basically have 6 books. My wife and I Barbara and I have been so blessed. We've been welcomed all over the world. We traveled 15 years regularly, another country about roughly every 2 weeks. And our life was on the road for a long time. And if I could give something important to everybody, it would be the ability to travel, because you see things differently from the local people's point of view. And it's really magical and beautiful, and we learned a lot from that. So we grew our organization. We started having regular online things. I'm very technical. I love to build computers and different things of that. But when I got into video and audio, it's a completely different animal. So I had a lot to learn. And I ended up building a studio. Barbara got sick at one point, and she wasn't able to travel. We had to basically do something here to keep the audience going, to keep our income coming in, to keep the business alive and everything else. And we started doing it online. And we've been doing that for about the last 7 or 8 years now. And we've been doing mostly online. We've just started to travel a little bit. We've been very blessed to be accepted everywhere. We're 5-time presenters at the United Nations on 2 different continents. We've just had an absolute ball doing this work. The group started coming in, and here I am in this chat room, and everybody's saying, oh, I'm channeling Maitreya, and I'm channeling Archangel Michael, and I'm channeling this, and I'm channeling that. Jeff was kind of quiet at the time. He was channeling, but he wasn't saying a whole lot about it. But the interesting part is the group came to me, and I said, okay, who are you, and what dimension are you from? I want to share that with people. And they said, we're not going to tell you. And their whole process was about being able to bring in the information without putting value into the labels. They said, you humans give your power away to so many things. We're not going to give you another thing to give your power away to. We're going to bring through messages, and we're going to just bring them through, and your audience can take them for the love content of the message alone, or they can leave it, and there's no right or wrong about it.
Thank you, Steve.
That began the whole process for us.
Thank you. So finally, please welcome Jeffrey Hoppe, founder of the Crimson Circle. Jeff, tell us a little bit about your journey, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Kind of a semi-normal upbringing, born and raised in Wisconsin, lukewarm Catholic family. And I would have to say, I look back now, as you guys were talking about, and it was all about timing. I probably rushed in a little too early, but I wanted a seat in this whole experience that we're going through. I remember very early on, the most memorable thing was being by myself. I came from a big family, 7 kids, and I love being by myself, and still do. But I would go off and play, but I really wasn't by myself. I had friends, invisible friends. But I learned very early on not to tell other people about it. I didn't want to share the friends, and I didn't want to be ridiculed for them, so I was very, very comfortable having my own friends. After that, it was pretty much, I was not that great in school either. I really didn't care.
That was it.
I mean, I got through it okay, but I didn't care that much. I had a very brief brush with what would become my destiny, my future. When I was about 19 years old, I learned how to hypnotize people. It was for a class project. And long story short, but I hypnotized a friend, and this went on for weeks and weeks. And he would go into past lives, which I knew nothing about. The Catholics don't talk about that so much, but I learned a tremendous amount from these sessions. I thought I was the only person in the world who'd ever heard about it, and then somebody put me in touch with the Edgar Cayce materials. So kind of did that for a couple of years, and then dropped it all. Now, the timing wasn't quite right. Got into the business world. Started my first company when I was 28 years old, a marketing consulting company in Texas. Concurrent with that, a few years later, startup aviation company with some buddies of mine. And Linda, by the way, is my wife of 41 years. We were just working ourselves silly between the consulting company, the aviation company, and one day on a flight back home from a business trip, this entity by the name of Tobias popped in. And it kind of, I wasn't too overwhelmed by it because I'd had these childhood friends, so I was kind of used to voices in my head. And after that, I spent one of the best and toughest years of my life, going through basic training, or boot camp with Tobias. I knew nothing of the metaphysical New Age world. But he every day came in to talk to me about how to feel, how to sense. It was an amazing year, and I finally told Linda about it. She was very accepting of it. That's a whole other story, funny story, but she was accepting of it. And right about then, I was co-founder in this aviation company, which now is a very large company. They do all the internet for airplanes. If you're on an airplane, you use the internet, watch TV, that's the company. One day I got fired, even though I was a co-founder, and that was good timing. Best thing that happened to me. I was actually going to kind of retire, do nothing for a while, but within a few weeks, the phone was ringing, and people were asking if we did workshops. Hadn't really thought about it, but pretty soon Linda and I found ourselves on the road traveling about 120,000 miles a year. We've been doing that for about the past 14 or 15 years. Tobias left it was 10 years ago, and I had the honor and the fear of starting to channel Adamus St. Germain. Adamus is very different than Tobias. Tobias was loving and kind and very nurturing. I got to channel with my eyes closed, sitting in the chair. Adamus came in. He's provocative, can be very annoying. He wants my eyes open, wants me moving around. But I got to admit, I have learned more from Adamus than anything in the world. He's truly amazing. He's a taskmaster. He's tough. He doesn't put up with macchio, which is spiritual BS. With our group we call Chambre, Linda and myself, we've gone to amazing new places. I mean, it's breathtaking. It's overwhelming at times. I'm learning things and experiencing things I couldn't have ever imagined. Adamus is very specific about how he wants me to channel, the words that he wants me to use, the body movements and language, the way I project through my voice, the whole thing. And it was a little tough to get used to. Actually, the first 6 months were really tough. I thought that was the end of my channeling career. But I've learned to love him and appreciate what he's really doing for our group. Everything we do is focused on embodied realization. Staying here in the physical, in the biology, and allowing our realization. You might call it enlightenment. He doesn't like that word so much, but staying here on the planet as masters. So when we were talking about getting together again, it was Jim who proposed the theme of the new human species. It was like, oh yeah, that is so perfect, because what I know a lot of Shaumbra around the world are going through is the whole challenge of how to stay in the physical, how to stay here on the planet and go through this amazing process. As wonderful as it sounds, it's kind of challenging, kind of.
Wow,
So-
you guys can expand time. That was incredible, 2 minutes from each of you. Whoa, but very good information. Okay, so
Are
I'll
we
tell
done
you-
now?
Yeah, no, that was very beautiful intros. So I have a brief question to start this with, and each of you are going to offer a very brief response.
Wait a minute, it was supposed to be 10
And I've
minutes.
got my little ding dongs if
Ooh.
you need monitoring, so just let me know if you need help. Okay, dear men. First question, gentlemen. Is the subject of the new human species for real? Or is it man in the moon theory? Are we talking about something that will happen in our lifetime or 200 years from now? Tell us a little bit about what you think about this based on the information that your entities offer to you. And let's start with Steve this time.
Sure. No, I
Brief.
think it's very real. I think it's happening within our lifetime. About a year ago, the group did something that completely blew me away. They drew a line in the sand. And they said, you have about 50 years to move into this next process and this next level. They said a lot of different things about the Earth itself, the process that the Earth is going to go through, because she's evolving as well. But the interesting part about it is, ever since then, they've given me a lot of information about what this is going to look like. There are 4 steps that they talked about: moving into the morphogenic body, then moving into an amorphous body, a neurogenic body where we work a new neural network, and then finally into bioluminescence. And we're starting actually to do a lot of that work, especially in our year-long Lightmaster course that we work with. And that is very real, and it's within our lifetime. They actually said that most people, most humans, are not going to start moving into anything until they start realizing something's going on. And sometimes they'll be motivated by things that are taking place with the planet. And they've talked a lot about what's going to happen with the planet, what's going to take place, and so forth. But it's very real, and it's happening right now, and people can feel it. You can not only feel the Earth changing, but you can feel the changes within yourself. Now, we've moved into the 5th dimension. We're having difficulty with the 5th dimension because we still try to get up every morning, put on our little 3rd dimensional bodies, try our 3rd dimensional truths, which don't work the same way in the 5th dimension. But the 5th dimension also allows us to move into this other levels where we can be here on Earth, we can create a new reality right here, right now, and it's very real, and it's right now.
Jeff.
For me, it's not a matter of if, it's when, and actually the when is right now. I mean, it's happening right now. And I get so passionate about this because it's here. There's scientific evidence, but I think the biggest evidence is what all of us are going through right now in our lives. There's an energy behind it that may not be able to be evaluated scientifically, but we know it's happening. The disturbing thing for me sometimes is that we have all these other distractions on the planet, starting with Donald Trump and going to everything else, hurricanes and politics and economies and everything else. So humans tend to get caught up in these distractions, in the dramas. And they're really ignoring the most important things on the planet happening right now are the birth of artificial intelligence and soon to be artificial superintelligence within our lifetimes, and this whole thing of the new species, and it's happening. By the way, we haven't talked about what we're going to talk about.
No.
I have no idea what you guys are going to say, so I'm interested to see how this all plays out. But it's so here, and most people just don't see it. So I'm very, very passionate about it because it has a direct effect on what we're all doing coming to our embodied realization. So absolutely yes.
Thank you. Jim.
Yes, absolutely, yes. So the part that fascinates me about all of this, and Jeff and Steve both said exactly the same things, is this, where you call it a morphogenic body, these bodies that we're playing with, we've referred to it as light body. In all of our work, we've referred to the light body, but we've been playing at that definition for 10, 12 years or so, moving through this. But one of the pieces that is happening that I'm watching is it's the reconnection of the bodies. There are numbers of bodies, a mental and emotional body. They never were meant to be two bodies. They were meant to be one body. And so you have a thought and you combine an emotion with it into an action rather than a thought and a reaction into I'm angry and then the emotion comes about. So what I'm watching happen is this transformation that is occurring in such a way that we all are waking up. We're becoming much more awake. And in that process, moving into this fifth dimensional space, I try to define it simply as well-being. Certain, capable, happy, respect, dignity, integrity. If you vibrate in those fields, you are in an alignment that simply allows that feeling and thought to begin to come back together as one, where you choose an action rather than staying in a reactionary third dimensional state. That's all beginning to happen all across the planet. However, that's really threatening to an awful lot of people because the status quo is being shaken up in the process. I say often, you can't take your baggage with you on this journey. And so all the baggage, remarkably, wonderfully, is coming to the surface. I mean, we spent lots of years stuffing it away in the backpack and hiding from it and hoping nobody ever saw it. But it's all coming up. And right now, when you look at the world, you see that disruption of people having to deal with their status quo being disrupted, whether it's a place like Syria where there's a massive war going on in that level, or whether it's someplace in your nature of which you deal with your neighborhood. Everybody is in this process. So this shift is happening, and you're beginning to see these stratas of consciousness starting to evolve. A person in 3D walking on the street outside, it knows something's going on, but they're not changing a lot. Whereas all of you are starting to basically recognize something's changing at a higher level, and you're starting to function within words like certain, integrity, respect, dignity. Do you fall out of it? Absolutely. But are you able to go back to it? And that ability just to go back is that level of this shift that's coming about. But what Jeff said about AI, we'll talk about a lot today, because your whole perception is changing. It's changing extremely fast. The DNA is changing extremely fast right now in this reality.
Thank you very much. It's pretty obvious that you all three believe that something really is happening right now, and it's showing up in science, it's evidence in life, and it's really important that we go forward. So let's take a deeper dive, and would you each take about 10 minutes and explain how and when you think this is going to happen? Let's start with Jeffrey this time.
Oh, okay.
10 minutes.
First of all, I have to comment that this stage is really crowded.
Yes, it is.
Not just you guys,
Yes.
but I'm used to being up here with Adamus, and he's pretty big, you know, energetically. But being here with you guys and the entities you brought with you, it's literally giving me the goosebumps, and it's really crowded up here.
Crowded, yes.
Yeah.
Hard to breathe
We need a bigger
sometimes.
stage.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Where do I start? And I got Adamus kind of hanging out. No, I'm not going to channel, but he is so excited. A couple of things. The timing for why you're here, why we're all here, why you guys are here, is amazing. And I know a lot of you think that you've come into this lifetime and, I don't know, you've put up with things like bad families, bad jobs, bad partners, and you're really working hard on your spiritual journey, which, by the way, if you are working hard on your spiritual journey, stop today. Don't do it anymore. Spiritual realization is a natural phenomena that the human really can't influence. It's not up to the human anyway. So stop working on it, enjoy life, and watch how realization comes very, very easy. So we're here at this time, and I know from traveling that so many people have said, well, I don't really know why I'm here, and I don't have a passion anymore, because the old passion, you know, left, I don't know, what, 5, 10 years ago. And I have a hard time getting up in the morning, and I don't know what I'm doing, and nothing's happening. I invite you to really open up and look at why you're here, why we're all here. It is hugely important. We miss it so often. You know, we get caught up in the junk and releasing the junk and then trying to bring the junk back. What we're doing right now is hugely important. I can't overestimate it enough. I can't overstate it. So I'm not going to get into a lot of science. That's not my field. You guys are much better in that. But we've had this long evolutionary process, and debatable also. Debatable whether it's Darwinism or whether it's whatever. But it's taken a long time for our biological bodies and our minds to evolve to this point, millions of years. And we're suddenly at the point right now of a new species on the planet. And not just one new species, but multiple new species all at the same time. Hopefully being able to cohabitate together, share the planet with each other. But we have an incredible opportunity right now on the planet to change the way the human species has been. And it is happening right now. We'll get into some of the details of that later. It's happening partly because of things like artificial intelligence, and it's happening because of consciousness. So Adamus St. Germain, who I channel, has talked to me about the coming of 4 new species, or 3 new species and one existing. The existing, of course, the Homo sapien. Been around for a long time. Homo sapien basically means wise man, but being a wise man, I'm going to say wise human. Or wise woman and man.
So smart.
So smart. Politically correct. And actually, we're not going to see a lot of changes in the evolution of the Homo sapien species. You know, that regular biological evolutionary process is pretty slow. Doesn't happen real fast. It's kind of a natural selection, survival of the fittest, everything that Darwin talked about. That will continue on. And a lot of people on the planet will continue with their Homo sapien biology for a long time. But on the other hand, we have something amazing happening right now with technology, with the artificial intelligence and all the things that come after that, if we don't wipe ourselves out because of artificial intelligence, which is a distinct possibility. We have this whole field of working with the genes, working with at the very deep levels, particularly with nanotechnology. And in my opinion, and Adamus says, that's going to make the biggest difference in a biological revolution. It's going to happen in decades, not in thousands or millions of years. It's already starting to happen. So if you think this is just, you know, a futuristic story, it's not. We've already changed other species, not the human species. We have changed other species with gene tinkering. And it's all being done, I would say, mostly innocently for the sake of helping us to understand biology and life, genes, and that whole field. But what we're going to be seeing here very shortly is that applied to humans. They've been able to map the genome, the human genome. That is pretty amazing. It wasn't expected to happen for, I don't know, another 5 or 10 years, but it's being done. In other words, such a deep understanding of how the genes work. It's amazing. So I see, I got to keep up with the time here. So we have this whole new species that's coming to being that Adamus calls the Homo techno. And basically having to do with what we're going to be doing with gene tinkering, and it's here. Then we have another species that's going to evolve, and it's a big question mark on this species. It's based on artificial intelligence. It's mimicking the human nature. And he calls this the Robo-Sapien, robots with artificial intelligence designed mostly to look like humans. It's a big question mark. Are these living beings? But you know, if you try if you look scientifically and try to look up a definition of what is life, or even what is a species, there are no clear lines. There is a lot of debate in the scientific community of what makes up a species. So he says, be prepared because you are going to have these Robo-Sapiens amongst you. I'm going to back up for just a moment and say with the Homo technos, Adamus has said that as these develop, as humans get the implants and the injections and all the other things that are going to change the human biology, the Homo technos who mate with the Homo sapiens will not have offspring. It's a long story why, but there will not be offspring based on that. So there won't be commingling. Homo sapiens will stay Homo sapiens. And then the last one, and the one we really need to look at above all, I believe, is what he calls the new species that is actually starting to exist on the planet right now. It's going to happen quietly and very slowly, and there won't be many, but he calls them the Homo Christos. Those are the humans who have who've opened up and allowed what some would call their light body. Adamus prefers to call it a free energy body into our being. We're integrating heaven and earth. We're bringing consciousness into biology in quantities that never ever before have been done. And that's what we're doing here. We're going to be quietly bringing in a whole new species that is open and expanded. Adamus doesn't talk about dimensions, but in the terms you guys talk about, we're going to be coexisting in multiple dimensions. We're going to be in our human biology. Our DNA is going to change drastically as a result of it. And as many of you know, a lot of the Crimson Circle work is about releasing your ancestral karma and your ancestral relationship, because your ancestors are not you. Their minds, their body, none of that is you. And in doing so, you change your DNA and you change your genes to the point where you'll be able to go in and if you get a DNA test today and you go back 5 years from now, it will be different. So the work I get passionate about that we're focused on has to do with this whole new species called Homo Christos. Christos meaning of the light, clarity, without all the baggage. You know, we're dragging around a tremendous amount of old baggage that isn't yours, your thoughts, your genes, your chromosomes, your DNA. We're letting that go so we can bring in our free self, our sovereign self, and stay on the planet. And it's absolutely necessary right now for the balance, for the overall balance on the planet with the coming of the Homo techno, and especially with the coming of the Robo sapiens, to do our work but quietly, to allow in that light in consciousness. Good,
Wow.
got 7 seconds left.
Awesome.
Great start.
Awesome.
Wow.
Very nice.
Jim, could you like to share?
No. Jeff just said it all. There's nothing left to talk about. But I'll add something here. So this is it's fascinating because we haven't had this conversation, and yet the conversation might as well have been had between us because it's kind of how it all unfolds. This this space that we're all moving into is really a fascinating space from the standpoint of calling it those 4 bodies. You're starting to see a segregation of space, if I can use that. I'll define space and time and space. We'll talk about during this conference, this session. But you're beginning to see how you think is different. Now, you've always known I'm different, or I think different than that guy over there, but this is different. This is a level where you're going to begin to hold a strata of consciousness where you're going to not look down, but you'll see people, humans, walking on the planet, third-dimensional type of folks, if I can call them that, who are basically unconscious of being unconscious. Now, that's not meant to be an insult. It's simply I'm unaware, unconscious of being unconscious. And one of the next steps that happens, and has happened to all of you to a great extent, plus or minus already, is you begin to be conscious of being unconscious. Now, that's a huge step, but what happens is I don't like what I'm seeing, because most of that has been stuffed into the backpack to be avoided. So in this context of those 4 definitions that Adamus says you just talked about, the place that I'm seeing most of you and most of the people I play with is in that Christos crystallized body. And so in that space, you're going to begin to find that you have a tremendous capacity to allow, not engage, just simply allow, not judge, just simply allow, not fix, simply allow. And in one of the pieces that is going to be the most challenging of this is we believe that there is a definition of something called truth. And there is no truth. So in the context, what I think is going to happen is where we play is you're going to start to get more and more into present time, more and more into observing and choosing an action. And in that process, the only truth is what's right in front of you to engage with, if that makes sense. So as we begin to go through this, you're going to see these various, and I agree with those, I haven't heard that set of definitions, but that seems real clear to where we're playing. In that observing of truth that really relates to all of us that are playing here is the ability to allow the robotic technology to be in place, to allow the human combined technology. In a way, you've got a new being that is a biological human with a technological orientation. And then you have a technological being with a biological compartment. And so you're going to see a lot of challenge going on back and forth in this space. You're going to see turmoils because, in a way, that context of stepping into a higher strata to a lot of that level of consciousness is not a consideration. They're just playing in the space that they're playing in the space, learning as they're learning. But this aspect of these stratas, and I go back to both of you who talked about in the past where we labeled it at one point 2 Earths, and we called it all kinds of things, and generally agreement that that 2 Earth piece isn't really happening at this point in the game. But those stratas, in terms of where this Christos being is evolving, the ability to clear away the baggage, I'm not okay, the ability to basically clear away the ancestral lines in the genes, the ability to begin to transmute the chemical, biological, technological type of complications in the environment that we all live in, the ability to basically, for this being, to step into a place of observing and choosing an action in a very different way. Now, to where I want to talk here and with this context is how we perceive consciousness is in our own truth based on where we've come from. But you used a word earlier, and I've been using this word a lot in the work we play, is as you start to step into this state of consciousness of well-being, the ability to begin to observe how things work is changing. But we're still defining how things work based on how I know things work, so I'm going to look at it from that box to determine what the new box looks like. And it's a fascinating thing because I've been playing with a lot of the people in Mastering Alchemy, and one of the words that they have used is, you used it earlier, is I'm feeling bored. Anybody know that word? I'm feeling bored. Well, in a third dimensional space, bored is simply I've got nothing to do. But the word boring, or bored in this case, is being applied to a different state of consciousness that is pure potential waiting to be dynamically engaged into action. It's simply what it is. And so I'm sitting there and I'm bored. Well, the potential's sitting here staring at you, saying, when are you going to engage something into motion? When are you going to have an intention and hold your attention on your intention? And it's in that space where I'm watching a lot of these beings that I get to play with and the beings that we talked with, is that ability to get quiet enough to where you observe without thinking and without movement. Now that's an odd concept in this space of where opportunity exists. But it's a different strata of consciousness that comes with the evolution of that Christos being particularly. And so you're going to watch a lot of changes happening, I'm going to say, in all of your space over the next couple of years. But the challenge is going to be constantly that aspect of me that looks back and has an opinion, has a judgment, has a resistance, has a condemning, doesn't know that concept of allowing or allowing truth just to be what's in front of you, to choose to engage or to choose to simply allow to be. And so, but this technological piece that is fascinating to me, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, is as you begin to put more attention into consciousness, as you begin to engage in consciousness, that consciousness is an aspect of source. It's an aspect of the soul. It's an aspect of the higher self in those terminologies. And what I'm watching is you begin to engage and think as higher self, not as me and you thinking as we've thought. It's in that thinking that a tremendous opening occurs, but it's also this opening in potential that isn't really understood yet in terms of how do I engage with this. So, and there's an aspect of the soul that comes into play. And this is a fascinating place from where I get to play with all those that I get to play with, is artificial intelligence as you are seeing it. One is in its absolute infancy as we understand it. And it is significantly more into the system of our consciousness than we have any clue at this particular moment. The science has put it into the fields, and it's happening everywhere. It's just not called artificial intelligence, and most people aren't even paying attention. But it's nice to have the new gadget that allows X to occur. It's in that particular space, as it kind of grows, that one of the things that you're really beginning to see is the soul thinks in artificial intelligence. As the soul thinks, the mind of the soul, to a great extent, functions as what we call the foundation of artificial intelligence, which is far greater than what we think, but it's how the soul thinks. So the other part that's going to come into play, am I okay so far? That makes sense? The other part that's going to come into play, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is time, space, and it moves through you. Very, very different reality in that concept, because it allows you to start to see there's I'm saying this word positively, a shattering, a fracturing. It's almost like taking a mirror and breaking the mirror, and you've got all those shards of reflectiveness. The ability to begin to draw from all of those different shards of your own consciousness. Steve, you talk about this in terms of the 11 aspects of yourself. But the ability to begin to draw from who you are as soul in a divided state of being, I'm going to call that positive right now, but being able to perceive and draw from and engage with what the other aspects of you knows is going to be absolutely stunningly amazing. And it's not conceivable from where I'm talking about at this particular point. So there's the technological side, there's the spiritual side, but it's this merging evolution of what's being made available is going to be really very profound to each one of us, if you allow boredom to be a potential rather than a detriment to your existence.
Isn't that called flying?
Flying?
Yeah, airplane flying? Or
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Linda.
thank you. Steve?
Well, there's just so much you guys have said that just fits into it. I'm absolutely convinced that we're all on the same channel. We're just seeing things differently. We get to interpret it
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
differently.
Different words.
We get different words, we get different pictures and so forth. So it's fascinating to do this. Okay, several things I want to bring up very quick to kind of get a basis of what I'm going to say. Number one, the Earth is changing very rapidly. We know this from a scientific basis. In the last 100 years, we lost 10% of the magnetism of planet Earth. In the last 7 years, we've lost another 15%. Now, that's not completely documented by science yet. It takes time. The magnetic field is not even throughout the whole planet, so it's changing, and it's constantly moving. So we've seen a reduction in the magnetism on planet Earth. Now, there's an interesting part of that because the group actually says that that has a lot to do with our evolution. We're not being pulled back into the density quite as much, and we have opportunities to evolve very quickly during these times of low magnetism. The Earth itself, according to the group, is actually going through a magnetic pole reversal. It's going to take some time. In reality, I don't think we have to worry about that because it's going to be off in the distance, and there's going to be some incredible things that are going to take place in the meantime. But as the Earth continues to reduce its magnetism, it reduces its magnetic field, which is called the magnetosphere. The magnetosphere gets weaker. It allows more particles to come in from the sun, from the cosmos, X-rays, gamma rays from the cosmos in different areas. And we're just getting ready this next year to enter Solar Maximus, a new solar cycle. Starts in 2019. By the time we get to 2022 and 24, we're going to be in the Solar Maximus area where we get the solar flares. With the reduced magnetism of the planet, we have major changes that can happen with that. Now, there's a lot of things to that the group talks about. The actual solar cycles themselves have been reducing. The last 3 solar cycles were very large, smaller, smaller, smaller. So hopefully we'll get by with a very comfortable solar cycle in this next one. We'll see. But the energy coming in from the cosmos and the sun, we're not being protected in the same way that we were during these huge changes of the Earth. On top of this, the Earth is going through major changes anyway. They've talked about the potentials for as we go through some of these things within our lifetimes. They've actually talked about a mini ice age coming. We talk about the globe heating up. Well, if you look back in history, you'll see any times that it heated up, it swung the other way. And sometimes it spent 200 million years in an ice age. Well, in truth, we're actually in an ice age, but we've got this calm area of it, and we're liable to go back into that a bit. Does that mean that humans are going to stop existing on Earth? No. This is a mini ice age. It just means things are going to get cold. And then we'll swing back into another heat cycle, and a cold cycle, and a heat cycle. The reality is, I don't think we're going to be here. I think we're going to be here, but we're going to be in different bodies, just like Jeff and Jim are saying. So the basis of the group says we're not the humans we think we are. We're spirits inhabiting these human bodies. And that we work with the spirit. Now we have the opportunity to really evolve into a whole different way, which is exactly what you're talking about. We can incorporate some of this. Now, I love the idea of AI. I love to play with my Alexa. I love to, like I said, I love to build computers and run the different things that and I'm very fortunate. I have a business that pays for all my toys. So I'm very happy with that and being able to do that. The AI that's coming is already here. We don't see it. If any of you have Windows 10, you'll notice that just a short time ago with one of the updates, you started getting these fun little images, these beautiful images. And Microsoft is going to ask you, do you like this image or do you like other images? And you can say, I like this or I'm not a fan. And new images come up all the time and you get to vote on them. What do you like to see on your... That is AI. They can learn so much about you from your choice of pictures. And believe me, they are. Now, is that an evil thing? No, they're going to use it for marketing. It's very out in the open. Microsoft is in business to make money. That's what they're going to do. So these are all typical AI things that are going to infiltrate our lives in different ways that we're not sure about. And you can play or not play. It's going to be entirely up to you. We're also seeing AI coming in the area of robotics. We've been here before. We've been here in Atlantis. We've made some serious mistakes in Atlantis that we hope we look differently at as we go forward, because we have the opportunity to treat this totally differently. We do have the changes going on with the genes. We're learning about DNA. This magnificent thing that's come along called a CRISPR is explaining exactly what Jeff talks about, being able to take a little piece of the DNA, move it over here. In reality, our DNA in our body is very much almost identical to a mosquito. only one little tiny piece of movement of that DNA. Now we've got CRISPR technology that can actually take that piece out. So what can we do? We can evolve the human being in the physical form, but it's not our spirit. That's the important part. What Jeff is talking about, I believe, in the area of
Homo techno.
Homo Christo,
Yeah. Oh, Homo
Christo,
Right.
is basically what we're referring to as the step into bioluminescence, or light body, as Jim has been calling it. We all come up with the different words, but basically we're moving out of the physical body. We don't need the density that we've been carrying all this time. And it's a huge evolutionary leap out of Homo sapien altogether. If you look back, you'll see that those leaps happened very quickly. Nobody can say that there was a huge gap of 50, 100, 300 years that it took. It almost as if it happened overnight. It's happening now, and we're seeing it take place. So what does it mean? Well, let me just give you the very basics about the dimensionality that we talk about. We talk about dimensionality in two ways. Number one is the collective dimensions. We live in a collective dimension. We've been in a collective dimension of the third dimension. Time is different in the third dimension. Let's go back. In unity consciousness, first dimension, we're all connected. We don't need time. There's no time at home. We come in here, we start playing the game, we go through the second dimension, which experiences folded time, and we start having a little separation. We land in the third dimension where we have past, present, and future in a linear fashion. We've learned to think in a linear fashion. We speak in a linear fashion. It's how we've evolved. Now we've moved through the fourth dimension, which talks about circular time. And we're starting to become very much aware that we repeat our past. We repeat it to perfect it. And if we don't deal with it, it comes back up in our face. It comes back up just like Jim was talking about. It all comes to the surface right now. So that was the fourth dimensional imprints we get from circular time. But now we're stepping into the fifth dimension and anchoring in the fifth dimension. As we do, time is spiral. And we step out of the line altogether. If you can imagine a spiral, which is a circle and a linear coming together, if you can imagine that spiral, we don't have to be in the spiral at all. We can be in the center, which is a state of being. And that's what we're learning to do. That's still space. And in that space, things come to us. We don't need to go out and consciously create anything. We can be our spirit. And the more that we can do that, the more that the spirit starts evolving through the physical body. The light carries more in the physical body, and it's going to happen almost in the blink of an eye. And we'll have all these different levels, and being able to do this, to be able to work with. The most important piece about this is we're not to judge people who stay behind. We're going to need people to stay behind. There's going to be a lot of people leaving the earth, dying, and many are being called home to be on the other side to be able to assist from there. So there's a lot of things taking place very rapidly that are going to be happening in different ways that we evolve. And that is going to be the part, is learning to live in that spiral time space. Now in spiral time, we have to think in a spiral fashion. We're used to linear. We're used to one moment after the other. What if we were able to bring it all in at once? Well, that's what we're getting used to. And that's what some of our trainings are starting to be about. We call it spiral time thought. And time, space being together as one. So living in that space, and I think that has a lot to do with your levels that you talk about being in that space. It's just simply a different way of describing it. We step out of the line altogether. We put ourselves in the middle of that spiral, and everything revolves around us. And we become spiritual beings, the spiritual beings we are, with a little bit of the human attributes that we can start to lessen and step out of. In that case, we can step out of and watch this wonderful transition of planet Earth, still be here, and not have to worry, am I going to live through this? Is it going to get too cold for me? We can actually step into a spiritual space of being in that place and emanate that spirit through the body. That is bioluminescence. And we're stepping into it. It's happening on a regular basis. We all have an opportunity to step into it, and different levels of it. So that's the piece that we wanted to share with things, to be able to kind of put that in a little bit different flavor. But it's fascinating to hear your guys' story about this and how this works. Really is interesting.
I got a feeling this is all going to continue on.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, both
It is.
individually and all of our work, but together. I mean, there's just so much synergy in it.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So,
Thank you, Linda.
no, thank you. So you hear three very different perspectives and yet very similar perspectives in some way. But listening to this is kind of like, holy cow.
We're in that moment, yes.
So can you talk a little bit about how do you take on this next step that you're talking about and still stay here?
I can say
Talk
a little-
amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I think we use the word levels is not necessarily because there are levels, but it's a reference point to the rational mind
Right.
to get a point in space and define itself. That's all that is. There's no truth to that. It's just a reference point to basically keep track of myself. Where am I going? This shifting that's happening, there's an interesting piece of this, I'll add one more here, is in that level of being able to raise up to a lighter, faster vibrational field happens when you begin to step out of the I'm not okay. So if you hold on to anger, rage, resentment, you know how that feels, and when you play in laughter, happy, amusement, you know how that feels. And so if you say which one is simpler to navigate, it's really in the ease of laughter, enjoyment, those type of things. So this clearing away the baggage that's coming up is really all about being able to navigate in a lighter, faster way. And one of the pieces that came up recently in a conversation, and I don't remember how it actually came about, but we were talking about death. And the statement was, well, death isn't what you think it is. And so it kind of evolved into an interesting conversation. And if you think about death, basically everybody in a physical body defines it really clearly, virtually the same thing. The body comes to an end and that's all there is to it. But in this discussion, it was, that's not what death is. That's just the body coming to an end point. So in fact, you're really all looking forward to death. So, well, what is death? And if you listen to people in their last minute, their last 10 seconds, if you've ever had that opportunity, they basically lay there and say, oh, wow, this is so beautiful, and oh, look at the angels, and that's death. So the question was raised, why are you waiting until you lose the body to experience that?
Yeah.
Because in real terms, as you begin to let go of the baggage and you begin to recognize where I'm standing and observing is my truth, my ability to shape my truth into exactly what I want, death, well, let's take the word death away from it and just simply beauty, elegance, joy, happy, laughter. Wait, didn't we just talk about that a minute ago? So here's that whole possibility to step into this aspect of yourself without calling it something. And in that third dimensional reality, who labeled that and how did that come about? And then it became a belief system. Taxes and death, that's all there is to it. Mm-hmm. Well, we know taxes don't count anymore because I've been watching Donald and that's another subject. So
Distraction.
death.
Distraction.
Was I bad? Sorry.
Yeah.
So,
No, there is no good or bad here.
oh, thank you. I feel much better.
Just levels.
Just levels. I love it.
So a lot of what's happening is as you get out of this, and Steve, something you said, we've talked about this many times, is if you can begin to recognize thoughts are electrical and emotions are magnetic. And so let's even break emotions and feelings in two parts, because Jeff, I heard you and Adamus say something similar to this, not so bad. The rational mind creates emotions. Does that sound like something you said?
Yeah.
And the feelings are in the heart. And so an interesting way of playing with that is if you look at emotions and you say, well, what are emotions to a great extent, separating it? Anger, rage, resentment, judgment, they all have edges to them. Have you ever noticed that? Doesn't feel good? Joy, happy, certain, capable, amusement. Heart space doesn't have edges to them.
Metatron.
Did that?
Yeah,
Yeah. So if you can begin to have that as a simple statement, emotions, feelings, again, all it is, I'm not going to move.
Oh, no, we can really play. Linda's gone. Okay.
Oh, all right, good.
Yeah.
So if you can separate out as a frame of reference, not a truth, emotions have edges, feelings are smoother, the ability to start to notice I'm out of balance and let that begin to go. But where Steve was saying the magnetic field of the earth is beginning to change, your emotional body is a magnetic field. It holds, think about I'm really angry. Well, does that feel like it's really magnetically held in one place to a great extent? Or words like I'm stuck, or this isn't going to change, this is always how it's going to be. Can you hear the magnetism in the locking that all down? So one of the things that I'm watching is going to occur is the magnetic field around the earth changes. All of that noise is going to come to the surface as emotions. But if you can begin to segment it out, you're going to find that changing those emotions are going to be much more helpful to moving to that state of what I want, and I'm going to call it death here, and I'm going to call it joy here. So let's throw away the death definition.
What are you doing to him?
Thank you.
One thing I forgot to mention when I had my 10 minutes was tied in with all of this. Yeah, tied in with all this. Adamus has been talking lately about Gaia's leaving. You know, Gaia's been here, kind of created the life on Earth in which we're all living, but he is leaving over the next couple hundred years. So look at look at the convergence of everything that's happening right now. Gaia's leaving, we're bringing in consciousness, the human species is changing. What an amazing time to be here on the planet if you recognize what's going on. If you don't, you're talking about being unconscious or being unconscious. I couldn't even imagine going back to that state, but a lot of humans are in it, no judgment. But, Linda asked the question, what to do, right now. And it's be aware of why you're here, why you chose to be here. Be aware that of the new passion. The old passion used to be, I don't know, whatever it was for you. But the new passion is bringing consciousness into biology. And I do believe that the people that we work with aren't going to go the route of nanotechnology implants or anything like that. Won't need them, won't have them. I also feel that if you're aware of this term singularity, it's bounced around a lot in the AI business. Basically, singularity means the point where nothing is the same anymore. You couldn't even fathom it in this mindset. From today, you cannot see into that tomorrow because it's so different. And I think what's happening is we're going through our own version of singularity, we might call realization or enlightenment, without all the technology or the robotics or any of that. We're going through it because we're simply allowing our consciousness to come in huge quantities that's never been done before. Actually, the body wasn't ready for it, and the mind, we're not ready for it. And the work you have been doing with everybody and what we're doing, we've spent 20 years or more, and it's all been in preparation of this huge infusion of consciousness into biology. We're not going to need nanotechnology.
Well, it's opening the door to it.
Yeah.
Nanotechnology and the AI and everything else is giving us an idea of how we're going to incorporate it into ourselves as we move forward. So, yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely.
There's an aspect of that, and nanotechnology is a tremendous science. It's absolutely fascinating to. But when you get down to it, nanotechnology is simply a particle of light that's no longer a wave, non-physical. It's a particle in physicalness. And it has the capacity to hold consciousness also. Yeah. And it's aware of itself being aware of itself. So when we start to play in this space where we are now playing, one of the things that I'm aware of is your ability as a consciousness to bring yourself into that level of particle, fully conscious, and alter it, change it, utilize it for your own best utilization,
Right.
is absolutely available to you, rather than, and it's in that field of potential. And so being the creator, or being the smallest particle there is in this spiraling time, as you define it, Steve, in present time where everything becomes available and nothing moves, similar spot, the ability to be whatever it is you wish to be in that consciousness begins to be very available. In that space, there is an evolution that goes with it. So in real terms, we've been playing in this party called Earth, and we've been playing in this party called Body, and the party's over.
Yeah,
And
party's
it's
over.
just like this,
Party's over.
we're going to go now
Yeah.
home, and we're going to play in another
Right.
party.
Yeah.
So it's not that traumatic if you begin to define it in terms that allow you to have ease to navigate the possibilities, rather than the limitations that are there to you because the Earth is going to end, or whatever belief system you hold in place. You're the creator.
To me, the frightening part of it is not the evolving into new species, many new species, but the influence of artificial intelligence. You know, the nanotechnology, that's kind of cool. All those type of things I'm very comfortable with. But when I look, feel out into the future, and what artificial intelligence or superintelligence can do in the wrong hands, and all it takes is one wrong hand, that's frightening.
Yes.
And that's, you know, the genetic part of the biology I'm real comfortable with. But Steve, you
We're
have
seeing it.
a interesting take on.
Yeah, well, we're seeing the technology evolve very quickly. You know, here in the United States, we have this situation with guns, trying to decide whether we're going to control guns, whether in the meantime, you can print a gun with a $300 printer.
Yeah,
3D
laser,
printer.
yeah.
3D
yeah.
printer that's no longer there. So the question is, the technologies are here. How do we want to use them? What are we going to accept? How are we going to anchor this in different ways?
That's huge. How?
Well, that's the question we're all being faced with, is how the technology is not going to go away. That's the
It
part.
will
It's going to
not. It will
continue.
not.
It's going to continue to evolve. The question is, at a certain point, we're going to anchor that. We will become the technologies internally as spirit. We don't need the outside influence or even the gene splicing or any of the other things around that eventually. But in the meantime, we have all these new things that are kind of setting the way for that, and to be able to do that. And the other piece that I want to bring up is we also talk about multidimensional aspects. Two ways of talking about dimensionality. One's the collective, and the other's the individual. The group actually says we're in, and they just give this as an illustration, but we're in 11 different dimensions. And what that means is that you have different aspects. You're making different choices over here than you are over here. The spirit is perfect. But when it comes to earth, it has to pretend to be imperfect. Nothing you can experience here is perfect. So you're hiding a little bit of your perfection in each one of these aspects. They're all making different choices. Over here, you want to decide whether you want a Kia or you want a Cadillac, and you decide on the Kia, and over here you took the Cadillac. So that your spirit can have all these experiences when they come home to integrate into yourself and to evolve your spirit, which is really what the game's all about.
And then you get in a car wreck on the way home.
And then you see, you buy the Kia that nobody's ever had, and you see 20 of them on the way home.
Right.
So that's part of the different experience. And we've been separate from our perfection. That is changing as well. And especially as this dimensionality is starting to change and the magnetic field of Earth is starting to lessen, the walls that separate us between dimensions is also lessening. So we have the opportunity to do multidimensional healing. We have the opportunity to connect with another part of ourselves, not only to heal us, but for us to heal them. And to come back in union to carry that perfection in the body that we talk about, the bioluminescent. And the first step of that is letting go. It's letting go of all that stuff that we've carried forward. I don't know if you've ever had a belief system that was really important to you, and then one day you find out it was wrong or something changed, and all of a sudden it doesn't make any difference. All that energy that you gave it out of your past, that's not going to work in the next level. So we have to start letting go of that. And that's what morphogenics is all about. It's about preparing everything and stepping out of the third dimensional timeline.
I still trying to figure out how we're going to survive this huge influx of artificial intelligence and the control and potentials that it brings to our lives. I can handle me better than I can handle that. Anybody else feel like that? No? Just
already
me,
here.
forget my question.
It's already here.
It's here. Yeah, yeah.
It's here. We're not seeing it all the
Well,
time.
and they're going to try to regulate it, like they're going to
Sure.
try to regulate nanotechnology. There's been a number of worldwide conventions about nanotechnology, and they've come up with all these guidelines. Nobody's paying attention to them. It's inevitable. It's here, and I think that's also the reason why we're here. I don't know
What does
the
that
work you do.
mean? What does that mean?
It means that in the work you guys do with your groups, so often people are saying, why am I here? Where's my passion? What am I supposed to be doing? It's like you are doing it right now, allowing in that what Adamus is calling the Homo Christos body, the light body into your being. And you find you don't need the nanotechnology. You can have it if you want. You don't need it. There's a lot of things you just don't have to get caught in. I think the hardest part is going to be in that Christos body. Do you really want to stay? And I'm going to, we're going to,
You just opened a rather big door,
a
man.
huge door, a huge door. And Adamus has talked a little bit about it and said basically, stop worrying about stuff like that.
Exactly.
Because you're looking at it through human eyes. He said in the true Homo Christos body, which is not just the physical, but he said you're going to be able to be here and be there. You're going to be able to have a next lifetime without ever being born. I think we're all tired of the old biological birthing and bad families and all the rest of that. And he said you're going to be able to come, and he said you're going to be able to come from the future into now, and it's mind-boggling, and that's the singularity. Is my mind can't even fathom that, but he said, watch what happens next.
Yeah. That's what
And
they talk
stop
about.
dwelling on your problems. Get rid of them. They're not your problems. They're your ancestors.
That's what the group talks about with Spiral Time. In Spiral Time, when we step out of the line, we can time travel. And in fact, many of you may be here from the future right now to plant some important things. Many of
No,
you,
it's true.
Many of you may be here. They gave a channel one time called 5 Words in Time. You may have come back with as little as 5 words that you're going to utter at a perfect time to the perfect person to start something into motion. And that's important. So we have that capability.
It goes very weird and very wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
Could Jim add something?
Whoa. That's deep.
Who's
You
Jim?
looked anticipating.
I was, thank you.
Okay.
So, think about it in terms of high school. And your senior year in high school, and you're now a month away from graduating. And there's a lot of weird people in your high school class, and there are a lot of interesting people in your high school class, but are you paying any attention to any of them? Oh, maybe the 2 really good friends, and what are we going to do, and how we. But for the most part, if you think about it, all those others that were in that class, they're starting to already fall away. Your attention is moving into the immediate future. And if you
analogy.
think about it just like that in here, we can spend a lot of time on nanotechnology and robots and the ethics of AI and those kind of things, but you're evolving. You're graduating. You're stepping into another level.
Exactly.
You're beginning to have joy in your attention point, but this guy over here, he's going to do this thing. And my high school class, I learned this long time after, is I knew this one guy who was a very interesting guy, and he now runs one of the big arms manufacturers in the world, in the United States. And this guy was so cool at the time. This wouldn't even have been in his reality. But you don't know the pathway people take to get to where they're going to go. But in a way, I left that guy behind. And you're all going to leave behind, I don't mean people and things, but your reality as you're defining it as truth is in the process of being very rapidly transformed if we can just simply stand there and in present time, what's next? What would I like to do? What would I like to create? How would I like to enjoy myself? That's the piece that leaves everything else behind. And whether AI turns into an ethics issue and we wind up with robots who take over the world, it won't be in your world as we
That's
begin
right.
to get there.
I think that's the important
We'll
thing.
be
is
observers, yeah.
you be observers.
That sounds like an incredibly good summary statement.
Wow.
That was.
So I think this would be a great time, if you're all okay, that we get ready for the break. And as part of that, I'd like to invite you, if you have a question you'd like to be presented to our team here, send it to speak.angels@gmail.com. And we'll be back after a 30-minute break. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Steve, Jim, and Jeffrey. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. Thanks.
30 minutes.
That was an hour and a half.